Hello and welcome to Ewe Sew You. My name's Zoe and this is my channel all about the crafty bits and pieces I get up to. I knit, I sew, I spin on a drop spindle, I dabble in weaving from time to time, and anything else that takes my crafty fancy. So this week we are talking about the things I've been making through August. So grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. Welcome back to any returning viewers and to any new viewers, a very warm welcome to you. As I mentioned in the introduction to this video, this is my what I've been working on in August video, but let's get started with what I am wearing. This is the Calais shirt from Closet Core. I've done the cropped version, so that's just at the bottom of the shot, and this is in a rayon challis from Minerva. So there are more details for this project and a lot of my sewing projects, anything I've done with the Minerva fabric, over on minerva.com. There would be stuff from other suppliers as well, but I haven't really made much from other suppliers sewing wise in quite some time, mostly because I'm in the Minerva Makers project, so they send me stuff and I make stuff and put a post up in return, so it's quite a steady stream of fabric for me. I don't have any new sewing to show you this week. I have some cut out ready to sew and it's been sat there waiting to go for a while, so hopefully next month's roundup video will have some new sewing in, but not this week. Instead, for my finished objects, we have my slightly new obsession. I say slightly new obsession, my absolute new obsession at the moment. So I did manage to finish my tapestry weaving. A few weeks ago I showed you how I took it off the loom. So this was an improvised project, so I sort of made up as I went along basically. It's turned into a bit of a landscape. You can see there's a little bit of waving at the bottom. I haven't soaked it and let it, effectively blocked it like you would with a knit. I haven't done that to it as of yet. I do have some Ryanot fringing at the bottom to give that a try. It's mostly in tabby weave. I was mostly playing around, well, it's all in tabby weave really, apart from those Ryanots and a row of twining at the top. But I was playing around with how to change colours, how to do shaping, that kind of thing. At the top I've just knotted the warp together, so I mean I could put a rod through here at some point to hang it up if I decided to. It may just sit around being a comparison tool for as I progress in my weaving. But yeah, so that's first finished object. Let's move these warps out the way so you can actually see it properly. So it's a little bit of a sunset over water. As I say, I just made it up as I went along. With mostly the yarn that came with the loom. I did need to add a bit of white in towards the end just to finish it off. Some leftover white scraps from my stash. That is a good thing with weaving. It goes through yarn quite quickly and it'll use up your scraps quite effectively. So that's that. I'm pleased with how it's turned out. Yeah, I just need to, as I say, soak it and pin it out, let it dry like you would with a knitted garment, just to see if that'll make it lie flat. It's not perfect, but it's a start. I'm still learning with weaving. The other finished object I'm counting as a finished object, but it is part of a larger project. You may recall quite some time ago I completed this Sophie's Garden Square for the Sophie's Dream pattern blanket. Because the yarn is variegated, you can't really see the pattern too much in this square. It's a Game of Crafting yarn, so I've got the Game of Crafting Blanket Club this year. So this was January's yarn. I have now finally, now that we're through August, completed February's square. Again, it's a very highly variegated yarn. I suspect quite a lot of them will be this variegated, but I'm okay with not actually being able to see the pattern too much. Because you can feel it. Some of the skeins will be a little bit less variegated, so some of the squares you may see a bit more of the pattern. It's just a little bit busy when it's highly variegated yarn, and that, I'm okay with that, as I say. So this is February's square. I haven't blocked either of them yet. I'm going to wait till I've got all the squares done and then block them before I put them together, so just to make sure that I'm blocking them all to the exact same size. So I'm trying to keep them in order. So I've got January on top of February, and I've got some yarn to cake up for March through to September. Waiting on the August yarn No, I think the August straight yarn has arrived. There's a cake up through to August, and then the September yarn will be coming later in the month. The payment goes out fairly early on in the month, and the yarn comes out later on, as you'd expect, really. So yeah, so I've got a few skeins of yarn to cake up so that I can carry on making these squares. Hopefully I will have most of the squares done by December. I'm not obviously expecting to get the blanket finished until into next year, because once I've done 12 squares, you get 2 skeins each month with the Game of Crafting Blanket Club. And you choose your base. I went for a fingering weight with some sparkle in it. So the squares are using just under 1 skein. The 2 skeins for each month are slightly different to each other, so I could, if I wanted to, do 24 squares. I think 12 is going to be big enough. But once I've done probably 6, I'll make a final decision on that. But even doing 12 squares, once I've got the 12 done and got them blocked, I've then got to put them together and put a border on. So I'm expecting kind of a January, February finish if I'm doing 12 squares, because December's yarn, I won't have finished doing that square until into January. If I do decide to do the other 12 skeins as squares as well, then that's obviously going to make it take a bit longer. It'll also be a massive blanket if I do that. So my thinking at the moment is that I hold back those 12 second skeins and use them for other things. They're all sock weight yarn, they're all suitable for socks, they've all got sparkle in, so they could go into the sock stash, they could make fingering weight garments. So there's all sorts of stuff I can do with the yarn that's not going into the blanket. So yeah, so I'm counting each square as a finished object, because otherwise I'm just going to have this massive project hanging over me forever. Once all the squares are done, then the next stage will be putting it together, and then it'll be another finished object at the end. So yeah, that's my way of motivating myself with that. Okay, so moving on, I don't have any other finished objects this month. My mojo has not been there for knitting and sewing and crochet particularly, because I've been weaving. So moving on to works in progress, I have actually done a little bit of knitting. I've been doing some work on my spiral socks. So these are in Yarn by Wool is the Answer. It was a sock set that I got from my dad and his wife for Christmas last year before, something like that. I'm about halfway through these socks now. These are socks that don't have heels, and it's a ribs type stitch that spirals around the socks as you work your way up. So it's not the most thrilling of patterns, but I like how it looks. I'm just not finding the knitting of it is the most engaging, because it's a fairly straightforward stitch, which is fine. It's relatively mindless. You just have to check every 6 rows that you're making the shift that you need to make. The toes that I've done, I did the kind of circular toe rather than a wedge toe, so that it doesn't matter which way around you put them on, because obviously no heel. So yes, I've got a little bit further to go, but about the same distance of the spirals go again, and then the ribbing, unless I decide to make them shorter, which is a possibility. So that's the socks that are on the go. Hopefully I'll have them done by next month, but you never know. The other work in progress that I've got to show you is here. I did mention how I was getting slightly obsessed with weaving. This is a sampler that I'm working on, and it's adapted from this book. So I am following the sampler that she does. It's a book by Kirsten Glasbrook. I'm doing the sampler that she does in here, but I'm doing it over a wider set of warps and a higher EPI than she does in here. So I have had to adapt it a little bit, particularly in this section. This particular shape, she actually finished it up into a triangle with a curved edge in that section. But because I want to make sure I can finish this section and do the other section and still have space to use the warps for hanging it when it's done, I've just finished that one off a bit early. That's the main difference, other than obviously the width of it and the ends per inch. So ends per inch is how many warps you've got in each inch. This loom, warped up the way that it is at the moment, does 10 ends per inch. I believe she's doing 5 to 7 for most of the patterns in this book, if I remember rightly. So I'm doing a little bit tighter. That would mean that if I was doing a detailed weaving, that I would be able to get more detail into more finer bits and pieces in that. So let's move this a little bit closer so you can see it better. And so as you can see, I'm not using the full width of the loom for the warp on this one. And the warp that I've used is a bamboo, and obviously the starter weft that I've got here is not, that's the warp thread that came with the loom. So yes, I'm finding the bamboo a lot easier to work with than the warp thread that came with it, because it's softer on my hand and it's finer, so it's working better for the fingering weight yarn that I've got on here at this ends per inch. The yarn that came with the project, with the loom that I did for the other project, was a bit heavier, so it didn't quite fit in the 10 ends per inch as well. But I mean, it's not like it didn't, it's just was a little bit trickier to beat down correctly. So that's what I've been working on. Oh, crash, all up. That's what I've been working on through August. In terms of plans moving forwards, obviously I want to get those socks finished. I do have another pair of socks on the needles from Sock Madness that I want to get finished as well. But let's not get too excited. See if we can get one pair of socks finished by the end of September. And I've also got a couple of shawls on the needles that I want to get finished. Partly so that I've got them. One is a hand spun shawl that I'm creating the pattern as I go, so I'm hoping to get that finished so I can write the pattern up and release it, which would be nice. If I can work out how to write it up for hand spun, because obviously weights and lengths vary depending on how you spun your yarn, so that needs a bit of thinking about. And I've also got a lace weight shawl that I'm working on the border of, that I haven't touched in several months, so I'd like to get that finished to get that off the needles. Then I've got a Charlie caftan to sew up that's cut out, ready to go. I've got a tunic from Lacala that's cut out, ready to go. And I've got the fabric ready to cut out and sew up for a handbag. So that sewing projects are looking quite intense. Hopefully I get those done this month. They are all Minerva projects, so I really should have done them already by now. So yeah, fingers crossed I get them done this month. I should certainly get the tunic and the Charlie caftan done, because I'm going to get the sewing machine out once I've edited this video, assuming there's enough time left in the day. Then I also need to catch up on my temperature cross stitch. I'm still a couple of months behind on that, and I've got some other cross stitch projects that are on, well, one other cross stitch project on the go that I haven't touched in ages, and an embroidery on the go that I haven't touched in ages, and a time painting on the go that I haven't touched in years. So I think my aim for the rest of the year essentially is going to be finishing stuff off, apart from October, when Stephen West has an MCAL coming out that I may or may not have picked up some yarn for. Mostly from Stash, to be fair. In fact, almost all of it from Stash. I've just had to pick up 1 or 2 skeins, because it's a 5 skein shawl, and I had 3 or 4 that would work together, but I wasn't totally sure whether I wanted to include one of them or not. And this is sounding a little bit cryptic, but I'm going to wait until October to actually, or possibly what I've been working on a September video, to show you the yarns that I've picked out, because, well, they're not all here. So yeah, so that's on its way. I haven't done a Stephen West mystery shawl as a mystery yet. I've in fact only knitted one Stephen West project before, and that was a shawl I did last year. So yeah, so that'll be interesting. I do like a mystery knit. I've done a couple of shawls that were mystery knits. I really enjoyed it. I doubt I will be on time finishing a Stephen West 5 shawl mystery knit along with the speed that he sends the clues out. I suspect I will be finishing it in November, because his shawls tend to be quite large, basically. So yeah, so I need to clear some needles for that. But yeah, I just need to get working through my works in progress, get some of them finished. I think that's really the aim for September. So obviously I'll get this finished, possibly warp up again and start a new one. I do want to do a video showing you some of the techniques. I'm not totally decided whether I'm going to show you on this sampler or whether I'm going to start a new one. I will probably end up doing both, because there are some techniques coming up on this sampler that I think would be interesting to show you, and then I can do a different project with something else, who knows. So yeah, so that's all I have for you this week. I aim to put a video out every weekend, so like, subscribe and ding the bell down below to be notified of when that goes live. Once a month it will be a what I've been making in the previous month video. The rest of the time it'll sometimes be techniques, it'll sometimes be specific crafts, it'll sometimes be books, it'll sometimes be just me waffling at the camera. So yeah, so do the stuff that all the YouTubers tell you to do so that you don't miss out, and I will see you next time. But until then, happy crafting and bye bye for now.